Hi, welcome. My name's Brian Lintz, and I'm seeking help for my mental health for the first time and documenting it here on YouTube in this video series titled My Mental Health Quest. Before we get into today's video, I wanted to just touch on something briefly from last week's video and something that I had not thought to do beforehand, and that was to put some sort of, let's say, warning at the beginning of the video saying that, we're going to be talking about some tough mental health issues. And in last week's episode, we talked about some issues of violence in my past and youth. And I know for a lot of people that can be uncomfortable, or it can bring up a lot of feelings on the subject or experiences that they may have had. So that being said, this series is going to have a lot of that kind of tough talk. And we are going to talk a little bit more about the violence today. So just want to give you guys an upfront warning about that. But with that, if you want to stick it out, thanks for joining me back. All right, so I had this week's meeting with the therapist, and I struggled to make this video because it wasn't the usual meeting that I've had thus far. Right? For those of you who know, I've been doing these sessions with the therapist via Zoom or telehealth visits. So far, the nurse practitioner that was supposed to help me select medication or medications has yet to contact me. I spoke to the doctor about that, and he said they're supposed to be contacting me any day. So hopefully, by the next video, we'll have some headway on that to seeing if there's any medication or medications that I could be on right now that could be giving me some relief from some of the symptoms that I'm feeling. The session was unusual in the way that it began as normal. The doctor asked me, okay, how was your panic and anxiety been this week? On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say it was? And I told him it had been a 7 or 8 solid for the entire week. And that our previous session had brought up a lot of issues, a lot of things that I hadn't thought about in a long time. And one of those things was, of course, we talked about last video, was the violence I experienced in my youth. That led me to think about the place I had been with my mental health at several points in my life, starting with that, and the effects that that violence had on me as I continued on through school, graduated high school, started college, ended up quitting college after 5 years without a degree, issues I had with friends and relationships after that, all the way up to my current situation of mental health. And before we even got there, time was up. So this session, I had relatively zero feedback from the therapist. There was just a lot of his listening. And at first I thought, I spent a lot of time talking this session. I didn't really get anything out of it because I got no feedback. I got no follow-up questions. I got no mental homework, things to think about. But as the week has progressed, as the days have progressed since the session, I've been feeling better. Not better, but better than I had the week before. And I realized that getting some of those things out there in the open, talking to somebody about them without judgment being passed, really helped. And while they were hard or difficult to talk about at the time, they made me feel a little bit more, casual about them than I had in the past. And certainly I don't expect this feeling to last. I mean, I know that these early sessions are really just about kind of getting to know me as the patient, trying to diagnose what's going on with me, them trying to create the best plan for me moving forward on how to help me. So we're still in that stage, and that's hard when you only get one appointment a week. And right now, because we have a holiday coming up, the doctor's going to be on vacation. So I've got 2 weeks in between, almost 3 weeks in between appointments. So a lot of time to sit on what we went through. And frankly, I guess that was okay. However, the period of time I spent leading up to that appointment from the previous week had been really rough. One of the holdovers of that has been my sleep patterns, which, as I mentioned before, I have obstructive sleep apnea, have had it for about 15, 20 years. I do not wear CPAP due to my claustrophobia, but my sleep issues are getting worse. Right now, it is about 5:30 in the morning as I'm filming this. I went to bed at midnight. Well, I'll say I went to bed. We're watching TV at midnight. And in between, I'd say maybe 1:30 when I finally went to sleep and 5:30 now, I woke up 3 times, went to the bathroom, came into my office, sat down, had a cigarette, went back to bed. But the sleep wasn't restful, what little I did receive. And most nights the week before this session, I was getting about an hour and a half to 2 hours a night, and up just about every half an hour. So that can't continue. Something's got to give. And I've been considering the idea of CPAP machine again. I don't know how it'll be possible for me. I can't even complete a sleep study because last time I was in for one, which was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, we got all the gear hooked on me, the leads, the ceramic stuff, all the metal, the wires. And I sat in a chair trying to calm myself down for about 10 minutes. And finally I just started ripping at everything. And I was like, you have to come in and get this off of me. I can't. That was very difficult. I don't know how I'll be able to tolerate that, but that's something I'm going to be talking to the doctor about to find out if that's even a possibility for me at this point. So I struggled to make this week's video because I felt like maybe I just didn't have enough to talk about. Maybe I didn't have the experience with therapy that would be beneficial to talk to all of you about. And that may be the case. But the one thing I took away from this week's visit, especially after feeling better, having gone through some of my mental health issues more in a kind of a categorical, historical fashion, was that it seems to me that you can't get through to the other side of the fire without walking through it. And I think I felt a little bit of the relief that you would after you kind of jump off of the fire pile. And I don't know how long that relief feeling will last. I have not actually even had the invasive thoughts about death, dying, and non-existence this week, except for the night before last. I woke up bolt outright out of bed, and the only thing in my head was the thought of just nothingness. And it only lasted a few seconds. I kicked it out. I said, no, don't do this. Don't do this. And then I had the feeling again. I was watching Amazon Prime series The Boys, which I had tried watching before and couldn't get through. But I give it another shot because season 2's out. And there was a scene where a character just basically explodes. And it wasn't so much the death as the thought of the instantaneous death and the instantaneous switch flipping from existing to non-existing that triggered that in me. And I tried very hard to push it down as quickly as possible. Now, I don't know if that is the best advice psychologically, if pushing that down instead of exploring it is the best. But right then and there, I felt like I couldn't handle feeling those things. So I chose not to. So yeah, struggled to make this video because I didn't know what I would talk about or how valid these things were. But that's part of the anxiety as well, I think. I'd really like to include you guys in the conversation. I think it's important. I would love if people would reach out to me, and there are people who have already reached out to me in comments about their own issues or message me privately. I'd like your suggestions as to how to turn this into a conversation, into a community, whether a forum, a board, a Discord, or just these videos are enough. I don't know. I'd also like to expand on this, interview some people who work in mental health. There are some issues dealing with mental health, not just my own mental health, but mental health in general, the crisis in our country, that I'd like to talk to someone about. So that's something I'm looking forward to doing upcoming, hopefully. I also have turned this show into a podcast where I basically just rip the audio off the videos, and I'm going to be posting those. The podcast is already set up. Hopefully it's available soon wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it's Spotify or Stitcher or iTunes. I want to make it available as widely as I can to try to reach as many people as I can. So, all right, that being said, last week's video, we talked about the violence I experienced as a child, a young person in school. And I said, that led to later behaviors and things, and stuff we would discuss in later videos. And I felt I kind of left that hanging a little bit. So the difficult thing in talking about the next part of this is that there are things I have done that I am not proud of. There are things I have done that most people don't know while it's my choice as an individual whether or not I share these things, I feel like some of it, for authenticity's sake, for honesty's sake, for my own sake of getting it out there and finally giving myself some reprieve from it, that I'm honest with you about it. That being said, hopefully this does not color your opinion of me in a negative fashion. It may, but there it is. As I continued on, you guys, I had talked about the fact that that I left the first school that I was in because of the violence. Finally, it got too much. And I went to another private school. I was there again on academic scholarship. The bullying continued. It didn't stop going from one school to another. It wasn't as violent for me as it was in the other school, but the bullying was intense. These kids were a little more cerebral about it, and I think it affected me and continued to affect me in a more direct mental way, if that's a thing. And it finally got to the point where I snapped a couple of times. In the last video, I talked about my parents and my father's job, and the fact we were comfortably middle class, like I said, lived in a nice home, but my parents did not have money, a lot of it. And certainly sending me to a private school that was very expensive, even on scholarship, meant we had to sacrifice things, or they had to sacrifice things. I remember getting a scientific calculator that was required for my education. And these calculators, these old Texas Instruments scientific calculators, are $80, $90. And it was impressed upon me at home, like just how important it was for me to take care of this, because we could not afford another one. Hell, we couldn't even afford that one. But my parents, my mom knew how to scrimp and save and do without at times so I had what I needed. So this scientific calculator was like super important. I took it to school, had been taking it to school. And one morning, prior to homeroom, I was sitting in the classroom. There were only maybe 2 other students in there, one of which was one of the older kids from a higher grade. And this kid was not one of those kids that had ever given me any crap, right? This wasn't one of the bad kids, but he asked if he could borrow the calculator. And probably the only reason I lent it to him was because he hadn't been one of those jackasses that had been torturing me. So I got up and I walked over to his desk. I handed it to him. He said, thanks. And he's using the calculator. And a few minutes go by. And he says, hey, I'm done. And I look up. And instead of getting up and walking the calculator over to me, he throws it. He is wide of my grasp. And the calculator goes sailing across the room, hits the floor. And the back cover pops off. And all I can think is, I can't have another one. And what am I going to tell my mom when I get home? That I was careless. My parents were never really punished me. My parents never hit me. But disappointing them was punishment enough. That feeling of disappointing them. So in that moment, I snapped and I got up and I stormed this kid's desk. I picked him up out of the desk. Now, this was a kid who was bigger than me. He was a grade, 2 grades above me. I picked him up out of the desk and I ran him to the front of the classroom. And I remember I had him by the back and by his hair. And I just started slamming his head into the chalkboard. I must have slammed his head into the chalkboard 6, 7, 8 times. I don't know if you've ever been pushed into a chalkboard. I have. It hurts a lot. It's like a very sharp kind of cracking sensation. Obviously, at that age, my strength, especially with someone bigger than me, was not enough to, draw blood but clearly he was hurt. And, I had done that. There were no repercussions from that. He never said anything. But I will tell you that about 2 or 3 months later, my mom was dropping me off at school, and there was an ambulance in front of the school. And And when I found out what had happened was this particular person had had a seizure. And I later learned that this individual had never had a history of seizures, had never had a seizure before. I will never know if what I did caused that. I will never know if there were lasting repercussions to him for what I did. In my head there is. And that's something that I carry. Yeah. So it's true a lot of times that violence just begets more violence. I can't blame the kids that tortured me and beat me for what I did, because I did it. I have to take personal responsibility for that. But that's not easy. So anyway, that is one instance of how the violence I experienced manifested itself in me. I wanted to give you some context back into that situation and not leave it just hanging and saying, well, these things affected me, but I'm not going to tell you how they affected me, because those things, that makes me uncomfortable. Anyway, I hope that, I don't know what I hope for that. The next video will be coming out. I don't know. I'm in between appointments because of the holiday situation. So I'm going to see if maybe there's something I can kind of fill in the meantime until I'm back into session in therapy. I know this video was a little scattered and all over the place. Again, it's like 5:30 in the morning and I have not been sleeping. So I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all of you taking the time to watch these videos, to let me get this stuff out there. And I hope that if one of you is watching this, feels any of these things or recognizes any of these things in themselves, that you get the help you need or reach out. Like I said, message me. I'm always happy to talk to people about anything. So that being said, thank you all. I will see you next time. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to end things on a down note. But it's not a down note, I guess, is it? Have a good week.